Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging NATO to implement a no-fly zone over Ukraine. But the alliance is opposed to the move, fearing it would put NATO in direct conflict with Russia. President Zelensky argues NATO's failure to act would give Russia the green light to continue striking Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin has warned other countries against interfering. Admiral James Foggo joins me now to discuss all of this. He is a retired U.S. Navy admiral and commanded U.S. forces in Europe and Africa. Admiral, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad you're here because it seems like we're hearing a shift in tone from the Ukrainians over the past few days. They've gotten increasingly vocal about wanting this no-fly zone, whereas in the beginning, they seemed to accept that that was something that was just not possible. So what do you think is behind this change?
Well, Nancy, I'm sympathetic to the Ukrainians for wanting the no-fly zone. Obviously, their country and their airspace has been inundated with Russian aircraft, Russian cruise missiles. I think over 600 launched in this campaign, and that is doing incredible damage to the cities. However, the Russians do not currently have air superiority, and the Ukrainians have been doing a pretty good job of taking out some of those Russian aircraft. We saw helicopters, we saw MiGs, and we saw Sukhoi aircraft going down over the last few days because of the influx of MANPADS. That's a manned portable air defense system, particularly the Stinger missile, which is very effective. It was used effectively in Afghanistan. The problem with the no-fly zone, and I have some experience with that from the Libya campaign of 10 years ago, is you just can't fly into airspace and declare the no-fly zone has been established. There are some requirements. You have to eliminate the threat. That means NATO or the United States would have to put missiles on top of Russian missile launchers, surface-to-air missiles, and shoot down Russian aircraft. That's a direct interaction between NATO and U.S. forces and Russian forces, and President Putin has made no bones about it. That would be an act of war, and it could create World War III. So the alliance has demurred on this request, and what we're doing is to try to support Ukraine in other ways.
So talk about those other ways. Obviously, one of the things that the Ukrainians desperately want is more fighter jets. NATO has now been given the green light, all these NATO countries, to give Ukraine fighter jets. So how many jets are we talking about? How do you get those jets into Ukraine? And can the Ukrainians fly them?
Well, let me take the last question first. These are the old Soviet-era jets, the MiG-29s, originally built by the Russians back in the 1970s, and then the Sukhoi jets that you're seeing flying around Ukrainian airspace. The Ukrainians know how to fly them, and they know how to fly them in a combat situation. Now, the countries that have these aircraft are Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Poland. And so far, Poland has come forward and indicated a desire to transfer some of those jets, probably the MiGs, to the Ukraine to replenish their supplies. I don't see an issue with that. That's just like a country trying to replenish its stock of weapons. If it was in a conflict, it would go and try to find them somewhere. This may be something that's provided to the Ukrainians with a deal later on some kind of a payback, but they're simply replenishing their stock, and they have every right to want to do that. So these could be effective in upping the ante for the Ukrainians against the Russians in the airspace over Ukraine.
What did you make of President Zelensky telling U.S. senators over the weekend, hey, you better start sending fighter jets to Poland and to Moldova because those could be the next theaters of war?
Well, I think that's a fair warning. And there's really the United States government and NATO have taken a two-pronged approach here. It's simple. The missions are simple. First, support the Ukraine in fighting and defending their territory, their airspace, and their sea space. And that means transfer of weapon systems like the very effective Javelin missile that you've seen against Russian tanks, the Stinger missiles that have been used against Russian aircraft, other weapon systems and ammunition, sniper rifles, and humanitarian assistance and food to sustain the army. We've seen the Russians are terrible at logistics and sustainment, And so far, the Ukrainians are in the fight because they're able to maintain logistics and sustainment. So a lot has been done, and a lot has flown into Ukraine over the last few weeks. The president of the United States signed an order for $350 million of aid last week. I frankly haven't seen anything move that fast in my recent history. 70% of that aid, lethal and non-lethal, is already on its way to Ukraine directly from the U.S. or our allies. On the other hand, the other part of the mission, the second part, is sustain our NATO alliance and reinforce our eastern flank. There's a lot of things happening there. There's F-35s going into the Baltics, and that's unprecedented as far as I know. There are Stryker brigades. These are armored vehicles with American troops. I think about 7,000 of them going into Romania to reinforce Romania. And there are Apache helicopters, which are tank killers, dozens of them moving to NATO's eastern flank. Finally, for me in the Navy, the last time we had an aircraft carrier strike group for a full deployment in the European theater was when I was on active duty in 2018 with a big exercise called Trident Juncture. We have the same carrier, the Harry S. Truman, in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Aegean, and she's going to stay there for the long term. She's conducting air policing missions and support for allies and partners in the region. So a lot happening on both these fronts. Help Ukraine defend itself and reinforce NATO's eastern flank.
Yeah, so Vladimir Putin's getting exactly what he didn't want, which was NATO machinery all along his western border. I want to ask you finally about something that China's foreign minister had to say. He had an opportunity to denounce Russia's invasion, but he didn't. He basically said that Russia is one of China's closest allies. He emphasized the importance of that relationship. Why do you think China made this choice, and what does it mean for the conflict?
Well, to tell you the truth, Nancy, I don't know why China made this choice. You know, in the open literature, China knew that this was going to happen because it's been written in the media and a lot of your good coverage that there was some kind of a deal for Putin to wait until after the Olympics in Beijing. China is watching this very closely. They're watching world opinion, and world opinion has turned on the Russians, which is surprising. I'm surprised that China has not condemned Russian actions. You know, we're seeing war crimes take place in Ukraine every day. The economic sanctions have crippled the Russian economy. Imagine if such economic sanctions were ever applied to China under different circumstances for something they had done in the Western Pacific. The Chinese are also looking at information operations. President Zelensky and his team are brilliant at strategic communications. They are inside the Russians' OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act loop. We talk about that a lot in the military. And they're beating the Russian public affairs officers and strategic communications officers at every event and every angle. Russian logistics have failed. You better believe the Chinese are watching that. And they're also watching the performance of these systems like Stinger and Javelin. So overall, I think the Chinese would be better off to condemn Russia's actions, not support them with oil and gas and wheat or other byproducts that could defeat the economic sanctions. And I think the world will have a strong opinion about China's inability or inaction in doing so in the next few weeks to a few months.
Yeah, so much about what we're seeing is just incomprehensible. But Admiral James Foggo, I really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Nancy, for having me on your show today.